Let the roll reflect that all the council members are present and a quorum has been established. Approval of minutes, council members, are there any corrections to the minutes of the March 18th meeting? Seeing none, they are approved. Comments from the audience. Is anyone here to speak to anything other than what is on the consent agenda or on the agenda in itself? Please state your name and your address.
My name is Gary Stevens, 1326 West 17th Street. I see on tonight that you have a council agenda for mill and overlay program. I'm not here to discuss that part of it, but I have some questions in regards to what was in the thing, in regards to the criteria. I drove those roads tonight. Looks like, yeah, they could use some improvement. But also, I travel 15th and Pleasant quite a bit, and I got to admit, there's areas there that compare to those two other ones. And I'm concerned in regards to letting them go too long to the point of where it's a major reconstruction versus a mill and overlay. And I noticed there was some criteria in there in regards to the condition index and so on. I just want to state that, you know, roads is one part of the infrastructure. We have a lot of infrastructure, and hopefully it's maintained and it's done so in a timely manner to not be, to be a minor versus a major expense. So, and there's been other roads that have been done. General Sieben going north of 55 from 15th, Pleasant, Westview, and it's like those were done a while ago, and it seems like just to me that 15th Street and Pleasant has not, I don't know whether it has been considered or not considered, but you know, I'm sure there's other roads too, but it's just that those are the ones I happen to travel. This winter was terrible on all roads. Now you got the flood, there's cleanup there. So there's a lot of things for, let's say, infrastructure this year. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else in the audience like to speak to the council? Okay. Council, are there any items to be considered? Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to propose we send a couple of things to the Operations Committee, mostly, well, all regarding neighborhood improvement. And these aren't necessarily major overhauls or anything like that, but I think there are going to be a few different items that will provide some benefit to homeowners as they are about to come upon the neighborhood improvements that we do need to do on all of our roads to make them safe. But it's something that you need to plan for, and we've heard from people recently that, boy, you know, didn't get enough heads up or whatever it might be. I wish I would have known more. And I will say that, you know, I feel we do a good job for the town, but and we also do go beyond the standards, so that there is that, but we've always got room to improve, right? So number one would be with our 5-year CIP that we have, capital improvement plan. It allows us to have knowledge of what's coming down the pike. And I think it's fair to be more open with our advance notice to homeowners about that. Now, there's going to be limitations to that, of course. I acknowledge we're not going to be able to say it's going to be X dollars, or maybe even we might not know exactly what year. We have an idea of it's going to be 2023 or whatever, but it gives people some heads up. So I think that's reasonable, and the committee can decide what reasonable is. I'd say 5 years just as an example, but it allows people to plan and set expectations. So that's one thing. The second one is for lack of a better term, to have a brochure, I guess, that is professionally created, that maps out the homeowner journey for neighborhood improvement. So what's that look like, you know, from the time you're informed that you're gonna have your roads reconstructed, mill and overlay or otherwise? What's that look like? And what are the definitions of things? And what can I expect? And how do I plan for this? And have a better concise package, basically, to provide to people who are curious or want to learn more, and give them a good resource in that regard. So I think that would be really helpful, again, for educating people, so that they aren't feeling caught off guard, even though they do want the project to go forward. And the third one is to provide some clarity to both staff and to residents as well, documented formulas for calculating assessments, so we can have some real firm information in our ordinances that we can point to, rather than debating how something is calculated. I think for fairness to staff, and just better overall practice, that we understand and document what that is, so that if there's question about something, it's a question about the formula, and we can review that and improve that instead of a case-by-case homeowner situation. I feel like that would be a better use of everybody's time and be more fair and well up front too, for people to have something to look at and wrap their minds around. Something else to consider for that point is that we're going to be coming up upon more modern neighborhoods as we come through our improvement, right? The more current neighborhoods are going to become up for improvement, and so we may see more of these irregular lots or whatever, and we just should want to get ahead of that right now. So I'd like to see that go to committee this summer, and discussed.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Council will place that on number 3 under administration, and then we'll be able to have council discussion. All those in favor of moving that to administration? Yes. Yes.
Clarify, you're asking, I think the request by Councilmember Lund is to have all 3 of those points added as an agenda item tonight, and for the purpose of sending it to committee. So I think generally you would want unanimous vote to add it to the agenda as a starting point now, and then you can vote on the moving it to council later.
Also move.
Okay, second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. Council, I will accept a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Fulch? Okay. Councilmember Fulch? Councilmember Brox? Sorry, Lisa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. First off, we have an item to adopt the ADA transition plan. Tonight we have City Engineer John with us. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The goal for tonight is just to give everyone an overview of what the ADA transition plan is and how we got here tonight and what we need to do to move forward with the ADA transition plan. So the American with Disabilities Act is a civil rights law prohibiting discrimination against individuals on the basis of disability. So think about folks in wheelchairs, think about folks who are blind. We're trying to update our infrastructure within the road right of way to allow these folks passageway through our sidewalks, our trails, our parking lots, and through our pedestrian ramps. City of Hastings here, we need to be committed to compliance. The city is committed to providing equitable service to all. There's a push throughout the state to update an ADA transition plan through council. Most cities within the metro area and the state have, just give me 1 second, excuse me on this. Sorry about the delay. Okay, I'm gonna have to fight through this. Okay. So most of the cities within have been updating the ADA transition plan from the year 2017 to 2019. We're right within the same time frame, so we're right in the ballpark. Funding, the reason why we need to go through this is if we need to apply for a federal grant, we need to be able to check the box stating that the ADA transition plan has been approved. So that's what we're doing here today, is to bring the ADA transition plan before you guys, hopefully get it adopted so we can check the box saying that we have a plan to move forward. So what is an ADA transition plan? Basically the how. How do we take the existing infrastructure and make it compliant? Again, we're talking about pedestrian ramps, sidewalks, trails, and parking lots. We're not talking about buildings. We're not talking about access to buildings. We're not talking about the restrooms within the buildings. We're solely talking about infrastructure within the road right away. So what is the process in gaining approval for ADA transition plan? We need to perform a self-evaluation, which basically is going out and identifying what we have in the city. Second, we need to develop a transition plan. We need to detail how we're getting from existing to compliant. Third, we got to come up with a schedule, which will tell us how we're going to get there. Fourth, we need to identify somebody within the organization who's going to champion this and get us to that point. And fourth, we need to gain input from the public, gain their feedback on how we're getting there. And then lastly, we need to adopt the transition plan through the city council, which we're doing here tonight. So the self-evaluation piece, last summer we hired an intern. They went out and walked the streets. They collected data on the infrastructure. They collected 6,000 data points. If you stop and think about it, within a 3-4 month span, that's a lot of data points to collect. They collected 1,100, they found 1,100 pedestrian ramps, 46 miles of sidewalks, 20 miles of trails, and 32 miles of public parking lots. So what did he try to identify? He tried to look at the slopes of pedestrian ramps, running slopes, cross slopes. So if you're thinking if you're in a wheelchair, it's very important. If it's too steep of a slope, it's going to be a lot of work to work your arms. That could tire you out. Same with if it's a cross slope. So we're checking the slopes on the ramps. The geometry, is there enough space for somebody in a wheelchair to maneuver? Is there a proper landing? Is it the right slope within there? Is there enough turning spaces? The condition of the surface, is it smooth, is it rough? If it's rough, it's going to be harder to go in a wheelchair for a long term. Curb openings and the widths, are they adequate for a wheelchair to be able to pass through? Truncated domes, this is important for the blind community. When they're using their cane, they can feel the different material beneath them before they head out into the street. So do we have truncated domes at the end of every pedestrian ramp? And signage and striping. Do we have the proper signs in parking lots? Do we have it at the correct height? Do we have van accessibility signage there? Do we have the necessary striping? All those were checked and the data was collected. So just to give you an example of a pedestrian ramp, we rated 1 to 5, 1 being the best, 5 being completely out of compliance. So the pictures here will give you an example. Rating number 1 is the best. We have the truncated domes, we have the slopes are under 5% for the running slope, under 2% for cross slope. We have proper curb opening, etc. Rating number 2, we have all the criteria met with the exception of maybe one or two of those items are not in compliance, but it's not way out of compliance. It's only partially out of compliance. So in this picture, for example, if you look, there's a 4-foot level on the back side. That is the landing area where somebody in a wheelchair would need to stop and have a resting area in there. The cross slope is 2.5% instead of a 2%. So this technically isn't 100% compliant, but it doesn't deserve a 3, 4, or 5, so we rate it as a 2. Rating number 3 is in fair condition. It still works, but it's missing some critical design criteria. For example, on this one, the very top photo, missing the truncated domes, the curb opening may or may not be properly placed and wide enough. But in general, most of the public will be able to navigate this sufficiently, so it's rated a 3. Rating number 4 is where we get into, there's a lot of critical design elements that are not in compliance. So we don't have the truncated domes, the curb opening is insufficient, the catch basin is right where the ramp needs to be. There's a lot of, the cracks in the joints are starting to separate. And rating number 5 being the poorest, all those design criteria just are not being met. This one, you add in the surface condition, there's a lot of cracks in there, very difficult to navigate. So what do we do with all this data? We have an online GIS tool that can be accessed through the website. The website is shown here on the top of the screen. And the general public, or anybody who's interested, can pull up the map, and then it shows everywhere in the city where we took data points. So the colors mean something, like the green circles mean fully compliant. The yellow means mostly compliant, the black means partially compliant, et cetera, all the way down to the red, which is totally out of compliance. What you can do on this is you can zoom in. It's interactive. You zoom in, you can click on it, and it'll bring up what we found. There's a lot more information that was collected, but we kind of dummied it down into just the exact information that we need. What is the rating? What type of intersection is it? And if you really wanted, you could take a look at the photo of it. This is the photo of this particular location. And there's usually a second photo in there to give you a different view of it as well. So that's what we have. So the next question is, what is the cost to bring this all into compliance? The cost to bring the entire system into compliance is $4.7 million. This is an unfunded mandate. So the next question is, how do we pay for this? If you pay it in 1 year, it's $4.7 million. It'd be the best thing to do, but obviously we can't afford to do that. We need to prioritize. One way to do that is to, when we're reconstructing a street, is to go in and improve the pedestrian ramps and sidewalks during that time. Second would be for the mill and overlay as well, go in to look at the most efficient areas and improve them first. And the ones that are rated like 2, for example, push those off to a later date. Third, we look at areas with the highest pedestrian traffic. If there's a ramp that's really has a high use, that would get priority over one that has maybe 2 pedestrians per hour or 2 pedestrians per day. Fourth would be the highest probability of need. So for example, if there's a senior housing and we know there's somebody there with a wheelchair that is using it every day, that would rise to the top of an area that we would need to go in and improve quicker than, say, another one. And fifth, and just the areas where the public comments. They may have an area that we are unaware of that, hey, you know, can we get this updated, and we could take a look at that. From a lower level detail of how we want to tackle this, going back to the reconstruct project, we want to automatically improve the pedestrian ramps that are rated 3, 4, and 5. These are the ones with design criteria that are missing. Also, we want to look at the ones that are rated 2. We don't want to automatically do the 2 because if it costs $5,000 for a little minor change, it's not going to be worth it. We want to do the other pedestrian ramps first. Mill and overlay projects, we would do the same thing for the pedestrian ramps. However, we would not do the sidewalk segments like we would in the reconstruct area. The reason is the cost to do sidewalks. If you have a $400,000 mill and overlay project and you're taking 30% to do ADA, and then you have to do an additional percentage to do sidewalks, there's nothing left to do pavement. So at some point you just have to stop and say what's feasible in a project, and we kind of made the cutoff saying we'll do the pedestrian ramps but not the sidewalks in the mill and overlay. The third is to re-inspect every pedestrian ramp and sidewalk that we do in a given year on a reconstructor mill and overlay. We'll update the system. The fourth, every 5 years, we'll update the entire system. Infrastructure continues to be dilapidated through the years to degrade. So every 5 years, we'll go through and reevaluate, see what rises to the top, see what has stayed really good over the last 5 years. The fifth, we will look for opportunities to create a standalone project to inject some more money into this to reduce the amount of years it takes to bring everything up into compliance. And we would do this through additional budget requests. And the sixth would be resident responsibility. This is nothing new. It's in the ordinance right now. If there's a dilapidated sidewalk in front of somebody's house, that they're responsible to update it. In a recon, we would come through and update it, but say it's not a recon year, then we would be asking residents to update their sidewalk in front of their house. Again, this is nothing new than what's already current. Schedule. The ADA transition plan proposes everything to be completed in 30 years. Same with the sidewalks. One of the reasons is a road lasts about 30 years. So in order to get through the whole city through a reconstruct, it takes about 30 years. The other is the cost. $4.7 million divided by 1 year is 4.7, but if you take it to 30 years, it's a more palatable $156,000. It's still a lot of money, but at least it's something that we can bite off and try to accomplish. The trails and parking lots, it depends on the availability of new funding to be able to tackle those issues. Thankfully, those are not the highest cost items. On February 27th, we reached out to the public, which is a vital piece of hearing from the public and on what issues are out in our city. We mailed, it was infeasible to mail out to the entire city. So we targeted mail to advocacy groups, to places where we thought would be high users of the system. So government agencies, churches, parks, YMCA, hospital, et cetera. There's the list on the screen here. We try to reach out and gather as much input as possible. A story on the Hastings Star Gazette was run. They were good enough to run a story, which was fantastic. We did a radio interview with KDWA. We had a blurb on Facebook, on the city website, and also on City 3. So we really tried to reach out to as many people as possible to gain as much feedback. And then at the public meeting itself, HCTV was there, and then also we live streamed through Facebook. Feedback, we had a modest amount of feedback, but the feedback we received was excellent. A couple comments, the timeline, 4.7 million is a lot of money, but so is waiting 30 years. That's a long time to get everything into compliance. Enforcement and education, there's comments saying there's opportunities to continue enforcement and education of what we're already doing on this. For example, some have noticed that handicap parking stalls, some people park where they're not supposed to within them, or for snow shoveling, they're not maintaining the 4-foot wide path that's needed in the wintertime, which is obviously difficult when we get 40 inches of snow in February, but it's still a challenge that we need to address. And then another typical comment was, there's a sidewalk that's bad in front of my property. What do I do? So then you got to ask the question, whose right of way is it? Is it ours? Is it Dakota County? Is it MnDOT's? What's the policy of the agency? And is it on the reconstruct CIP or not? So in summary, we are mandated to improve our pedestrian system. There is no hard deadline, but we have to work toward compliance. Self-evaluation is what we have. An ADA transition plan is how we get there. Public input is vital to assist us in prioritizing our needs. And the ADA transition plan needs city council approval, and the plan will be a living document addressing current needs as they arise. So timeline, self-evaluation was last summer. The rough draft of the plan was developed in December. We went to the operation committee in January 23rd. We had the open house for public input on February 27th. We incorporated those comments into the transition plan in March, and we're hoping the council adopts the transition plan here today. For more information, the website has a lot of information on it, including what our upcoming CIPs are for recon and mill and overlay. This can be found right here at the link. And with any questions, you can contact me. There's an opportunity right here on the website to type in your name and address and your question or comment. It'll go directly to me, and I'll do my best to get back as soon as possible. So with that, questions?
Thank you, John. Any council discussion? Councilmember Balsonic?
Thank you, Your Honor. John, it's nice to see you here at a meeting. The Public Works Director always keeps you back underneath a whole bunch of blueprints and paperwork and so forth. And I haven't seen you, I don't think, since I was the chairman of the Operations Committee. So it's nice to see you here. And thank you for this wonderful report. It is certainly very extensive, and thank God for interns, right?
That's right.
So we can take advantage of them. They're always so enthusiastic on this. You know, looking at the letter that you had sent to the council, that let's see, where was it here? Yes, the financial impact that the city of Hastings is mandated by the federal government.
Yes, it is from the federal level. Yep.
Okay, the federal government mandated this, but they didn't fund it. So we have to go through the grant proposals. Is this a kind of a bottomless well for these grant applications, or is the Congress going to you know, put forth a certain amount of money per year for all cities in the United States? Do we have any kind of an inkling on that?
Yeah, there is no money going towards this project itself from the federal government. Any grant that we'd be submitting would be for another project, like say a 316 project, or like the old trail. A good example would be the trail project we put in a couple years back by the Vermilion River. That we used federal money for that. We applied for a grant. Now, if we did that same project today, we would have to check the box saying that this plan was done. So that's the benefit of this. But yeah, we're not receiving any money specifically to cover these items.
For this, okay. And that's important, I think, for everybody to understand that. So we apply for a grant for a street project, and we say that a certain, do we have to tell them that a certain portion is gonna go to the ADA improvements then, or we just apply for the grant?
We would just, it'd be basically a question saying, do you have your ADA transition plan complete? So it'd be strictly a yes or a no. To the best of my knowledge, that's where we're told
Yeah,
at this point.
at least for now. And,
Yeah, yeah.
Until the feds do something else, I suppose, yeah. Is the 30-year plan satisfactory with the federal government then?
It sounds like a long time, but we checked with neighboring communities and we're in line. Generally, 20 to 30 years is the typical time period, depending on the existing condition of the city itself. So I don't view 30 years as being out of line.
Yeah. I figure in 30 years, I might be in a wheelchair and taking advantage of any improvements that we would have. I've got a question about the resident responsibilities. Is this something where we've got our code enforcement officer going around and that person sees a sidewalk that's in rough shape? Is that how we identify that the property owner has to do something with that sidewalk then?
Yeah, it'd be more likely on a complaint basis.
Or somebody complains?
Complains that there is, and we'd have somebody go out there and check it out and deal with it the appropriate manner, yeah.
Yeah.
And the liability would be on the property owner, so it's to their benefit to update it.
My wife and I ran into this kind of a problem, not that anybody complained, we didn't get anything. I was saying, I got to improve my sidewalk here in front of my house. It was in terrible, terrible shape. I contacted Public Works. I think Cal was the Public Works Director at the time. He came out and he said, well, you know, we're not going to supply any money for you. It is your responsibility, and I understood that. But then he said, but you know what? I wouldn't do it, you know, tear it out and put in a new one, because we're going to redo the streets here someday, and you're going to have a sidewalk that may or may not be torn up again. So, and then get assessed, you know, all over again for that. So I'm assuming, you know, somebody complains about a sidewalk being in bad shape. To what extent do we force them to improve that sidewalk, say if they're in an area that is on the horizon for street improvements?
I think it depends on how much risk the homeowner wants to incur on themselves. I mean, if they are determined to wait out till the next recon in 2 years, 3 years, that's just the risk they're gonna have to hold and hope nobody falls and trips and has an issue that way.
Yeah, because our neighbor was disabled and she had a power wheelchair, but she was having great difficulty going down the sidewalk, not just ours, but kind of up and down the street there, historic district, you know. And then, of course, we didn't have the ramps for the curbs at all, as far as that goes. And now I have a wife who's disabled, and of course we've got the ramps in, and you know, nice, neat sidewalks and so on and so forth. And I noticed last summer in the street project, Ryan and Nick, that I was looking one day and I suddenly see this ramp being taken out on the west side of 7th and Eddy. And I'm going, holy cow, that was just put in, you know, not more than 7, 8 years ago. What are they doing? So I found Bryce and I said, what's going on? And he said, oh, He said the ramp was too steep, so we took it out, put in one that is more accommodating on that. So it's nice to see, you know, that Public Works, when they're supervising these projects, is, you know, watching for things like this. I think it's an excellent program. I do have a concern about the 30 years. I would wish that we could do it in less than 30 years. And we'll see what other council members have to say about it then. Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question for you, Jen. I don't want to get too far out into the weeds on this with what it is we're here to look at. But you brought up something that might be concerning to anyone who is listening and has a sidewalk in their front yard. So if you, in your example, or intern, rated, these are all rated. So you've got one that's, this one's perfect, this one's, it's a 1, it's a 2, it's a 3, it gets up to 5. If you're in a driveway or in a sidewalk, that one with the cement wall that was there,
Sure,
and that one was what, a 5 or whatever you called it?
correct.
If that were my front yard, and an individual with a disability, their wheelchair tipped over, or they weren't able to feel that they were coming to a road and were hit by a car, am I, as a homeowner, liable for that? I mean, I get that I'm supposed to shovel and keep my sidewalks clean, and if there's, you know, some minor repairs, but we're talking about a federally mandated program, and now are we going to be telling a homeowner that, boy, you wanna be safe here, you might wanna update that level 5?
Right, it depends how much risk a homeowner wants to incur on themselves. I mean, it's their property, they need to make sure it's compliant, make sure it's in good condition. So if that's bothering them, then yeah, there might be some cost to need to update it. If they're willing to incur some of that cost and wait it out to the next recon, then that's their choice too.
Yeah, and that may be something for Mr. Flegel here.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think the general intent with that ordinance is that the sidewalk areas, as opposed to the ramps and the entrances into the road, are what's being looked at there. I don't know that the city has ever compelled any owner to repair any of the ramps or anything that's strictly for those access points. I think what we're talking about primarily there are very heavily cracked sidewalks where the passage would be difficult there. That's clearly on the property, although it's maybe in the right of way. So I think those are primarily what we're talking about, cracked sidewalks, not the deteriorated ramps and entrance points. I think those, I don't think that's practical that a homeowner would have to take those on.
Well, I just think you, Dan, I hear that and think, boy, some people are worried about kids cutting through their neighborhood and on their bikes in case they wipe out and get hurt. And now I'm hearing that having a sidewalk on my property might be a problem too. So it's not so much that I might not want them on my grass. No, I don't want them on my sidewalk. That's concerning to me. I guess I didn't understand that. I've owned 3 houses in Hastings, none of which had a sidewalk. But I just feel like we might have said some things that people are all of a sudden going, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know about all of this. So just to know that we might be now getting some phone calls as a result of this, because I was unaware that you know, where I work up on the frontage road, we had some really bad sidewalk. I contacted the city, found out, yep, as a business, we're responsible to pay for that. We took care of that as a company. We fixed that, sent in hired a company to take care of it. But I didn't realize that went the same way for homeowners. So, John, I appreciate it. But like I said, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I think this might be something that we need to know maybe a little bit more about at another time.
And just the key thing to highlight one more time is nothing's changed with this plan.
Right.
Tomorrow's gonna be the same as what it was yesterday. It's not, nothing's changed for a homeowner. This shouldn't scare anybody. Nothing has changed.
Yeah. And on a final note on that, I do want to say the way you ranked these, I do appreciate that, and how you've set forward to say, okay, we're going to start with the worst. We want these 5s taken care of. You know, the one gentleman in here who was concerned about his children being able to use the sidewalk in front of, sounds like near his home, they wouldn't be able to do that for maybe another 30 years. We want to make sure that it might not be the absolute ideal outlet for them, but it's safe. it's there and it's safe, and as a city, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can. So I do appreciate the way you've ranked them. I think that'll help us. Thanks, John.
Councilmember Fulch?
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, John. I love your interactive map. I didn't notice that the first time looking at the material now, and I'm zooming in on it. And so as I noticed on Ramsey Street, in the streets that they had the mill and overlay last year, it wasn't, like, those intersections are in poor condition, for instance, around C's. And so I was wondering, so this is a moving forward then. We hadn't been previously taking care of intersection crosswalks in previous years as they came, you were just doing the mill and overlay, you weren't addressing the sidewalk.
We actually have been updating them in previous years. We've been doing a mill and overlay since 2015, and we've been picking up the pedestrian ramps during this time as well. What has improved is MnDOT has done some extensive training in the last couple of years, so the product we're getting out there is going to be much, much better, just from the knowledge has been shared from MnDOT down to us, much, much more better.
Okay.
So that's something to look forward to. Everything that's going to be put in is going to be spot on compliant.
Moving forward. And then I had one last question, and it was in regards to the intersections that are MnDOT's responsibility, Vermillion Street and then Highway 55. I see that those intersections, for the most part, don't have any rating designated for them. And so, and so that I'm a little concerned. When we had the intersection reconstruction at 15th and Vermillion, that intersection looks so wonderful now, and it would be terrific if all of the intersections could be as safe as that one is now. And so I was wondering, how are those intersections being dealt with? Are you working in collaboration with MnDOT, or they're kind of doing their own thing? And
Very good observation. Yes, there are some along those corridors that are not rated on our system. MnDOT has them, so they're not being missed. They're just on somebody else's ADA transition plan. So MnDOT has those and has their own schedule for them.
okay, could we have that information? I would like to know when it is, what MnDOT's plans are for that, because you know the complaints that I get from residents about intersection safety are as they're trying to go across Vermillion Street. I mean, that's where I get the bulk of intersection complaints. And so I'd like to be able to know, you know, what are the plans for those?
Sure, absolutely. And MnDOT should have their own website with the information on there, so that could be easily dug out and found. Absolutely. Yep.
Great, thank you, John.
Any other discussion, council?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm sitting here with my calculator, so 30 years into 4.7 million, you're estimating 156,666. Okay. Okay, your assumption is that's going to come out of the city's pocket. But if we're doing these street improvements, and some of those street improvements will include ADA work, do we have any projection on what that effect is on the 156,666? 10%, 5%?
Yeah, I mean, you would eventually, after 30 years, tackle everything, because eventually everything would be reconstructed during that time frame.
So
The challenge is if the 156 is taken out of those programs, there's less money to go towards the pavement. So you're eliminating how far a project is. You're reducing the scope in the area. So as long as we know that, then, you know, yeah, the 156,000 is absorbed into the reconstructed, the mill and overlay project, yeah.
But if we apply for a grant, some of that money would be used for the ADA stuff, right, as you said earlier?
No, there is no grant specific to this.
Yeah, well, yeah, I understand that, but I don't want to say it's kind of wink, wink, but we get the grant, we got the street project, and we're going, oops, we got a couple of curbs here and, you know, that need to be done. Are you projecting that any amount of that is going to reduce this 157,000? Or if I make
If there was some money out there, we would look into it, we would apply for it, and we would try to take that number down using that grant money. I'm unaware of anything at this point in time, but you raise a very good point. If there was something, we'll apply for it and try to draw that down a little bit.
Yeah. I had a conversation, conversation with the president of the Rotary a couple of months ago, and he was asking, he said, what kind of projects are out there for the city that the Rotary could help fund, very similar to the pavilion that they did such a nice job with. And we talked about handicapped accessible playgrounds. They do make equipment for handicapped children, people, whatever. This act doesn't get into that territory of, say, parks, because I know you're saying trails. So are parks and playgrounds a part of that as well?
It's a very good question. It is not technically within this ADA plan. That would be part of another plan that would need to be drafted to take care of buildings and other infrastructure that we have in town.
Okay, because like I say, you had trails listed up there as part of the program, so
Right.
I'm making a leap of faith towards things like playground equipment. But that is something we, certainly could handle through a different avenue.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Your Honor.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor, and I think that was my one comment. I've seen this presentation, I appreciate it, John. It's something we have to do, we have to adopt so we can move forward. But I do think I would recommend that city staff do look at our facilities internally, because it's important to do these, but we got some facilities that need to be up to speed too. So I would ask, I don't think we need to hire a consultant. I think maybe another intern. I think they did a great job. If we could get some points also that we have on our own list, that when we address a building like this, make sure it's up to ADA compliant with that too. So if there's any other conversation, I would make a motion that we approve adopt the ADA transition plan.
Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. Second? Lund? Second? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Next, under community development, we have, John is with us tonight. He will speak to us on a minor subdivision and a variance. Thanks, John.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Madam Mayor and City Council members. I'll pull up the presentation here in just a moment. That is not it. It is here. So tonight, council members, we have two actions before you. One is both relating to 1548 Featherstone Road. That is a variance and a minor subdivision. Essentially, what is the request is to take this 2.5 acre property located here and to split off a lot which is in red. In doing so, the minor subdivision is the splitting off of the lot. The remaining lot, where the existing home is at 1548 Featherstone Road, would not meet our minimum lot width requirement at the front setback. Under our zoning code, we do have a requirement that at the front setback, which would be at 20 feet about this point, the lot would need to be 75 feet wide. At this point, this lot would be 30 feet wide. It would be a 45-foot variance that would be requested. As you go north towards the back of this newly created lot, you can see that it meets the lot width. It's probably about 143 feet wide at this location. What's happening here is what's commonly referred to as a flag lot being created, where you've got a new lot here created in front of an existing home. And so we did have the Planning Commission review this and hold a public hearing on March 25th. They did vote 7-0 to recommend approval of both actions with limited discussion. We did notify people within 350 feet of the property. We did not get any comments back from them. So we do have two separate resolutions within your packet. The voting on that is a little bit different. With the minor subdivision, it is a simple majority. With the variance, as the council is serving as the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, it is a 6 of 7 vote required for action on that. And so as we walk through the property a little bit, you could see the existing home located here. The newly created lot and home would be at this location. Other views of the home, you can see it's pretty well wooded, has some steep slopes and ravines that come into play in it. There's a little bit unusual situation here in the fact that the existing home located here is accessed off of a joint driveway, which serves this property as well as an existing home up here, with the driveway and the home being within Nininger Township. This property formerly was annexed in about 15, 16 years ago to access sewer and water services. When we take a look at the rationale for granting the variance in a situation like this, we have certain criteria that we examine. The two that really stuck out to us for staff for support of this were a couple of things. Number one, that when we did the street project in 2002, we did add a couple of utility stubs in anticipation of a split occurring on the property, and that the property owner was had made payment upon that at that time. So we looked at that as showing an intent as to a future split within the property itself. And because the property does meet the requirements of width and certainly is a large property with the remaining lot here, that we would be supportive of it. When you take a look at the ability to meet the requirement through other means, which would be acquisition of property either to the west or the east of the property, you've got a cemetery over here and you've got a road on this side. So you really do not have that capability to do it. So we are recommending approval of both actions tonight. We do have Shelley Kranz, the applicant, available if you have any questions for her, and I could stand for any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Council, any discussion? Councilmember Balsonic?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I worked pretty closely with Mrs. Kranz to see what we could do to get this project to come to fruition. And I think it's important that we realize that there is, as John said, there is a cemetery to the west of that property, so there won't be any, future building on that parcel. That immediate area there, I would say probably 100 yards west of the house, has no plots that are in use right now. And it could be a long, long time before anything like that happens, but I don't think it's anything that would affect that property. Again, there's a slope, a rather severe slope that, you got a pointer, John?
Yeah, right down in this area here.
Yeah, it slopes down pretty quickly, and so, almost like a ravine there, sloping back up, and all heavily wooded, and so forth. So it's a very natural setting. I was really impressed with the wild birds that were coming in, and I was also impressed with how you kept them from flying into your deck door, as a matter of fact, too. So I think this is a very workable solution, and hey, we get to build a house in Hastings. I'll be darned. Finally. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilmember Balsonic. Any other discussion? Oh, Councilmember Layfield?
Thank you, Your Honor. John, quick question. You mentioned in here, I'm trying to find it. Now, since staff has voted 7-0 for it, you mentioned something about neighbors. What was our reach out to the properties closest to them? Did we go to them? Did we just put an open meeting out there and they not show up, or where are we at with the neighbors?
Sure. With the notification, we notified within 350 feet of
Okay.
the property. I think that generated maybe 20 different addresses there and had no comment from anyone for that.
Perfect. Thanks, John.
Councilmember Brax? So we'll be, okay, on the subdivision.
And I'll second.
And a second. Councilmember Balsonic. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And the variance? Brax?
And I'll second.
And a second from Balsonic. All those in favor on the variance? Aye. Opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Okay, let's see. So now we are, see council. Okay, so Dan will speak to us on seeking the council direction on the consent agenda process.
Thank you, Your Honor, and council, hopefully this will be a relatively easy item. Recently, about a month or so ago, it was brought to staff's attention that the consent agenda language that's right here prior to the consent agenda on the agenda listed that either a council member or a citizen could remove any of the items from the consent agenda and have it be placed on the appropriate portion of the agenda. Frankly, myself and I think other staff had never really realized that the word citizen was there, and I had some concerns that you know, in a worst-case scenario, may allow a citizen to come in at every meeting and remove all the items from the consent agenda, basically defeating the purpose of having that. So initially, I suggested to staff that language just be removed. I thought that was a non-issue, frankly, but it was questioned, and I think rightfully so. So what we're asking for is, can the council give direction to staff on the printing of the agenda? Do you prefer that any any citizen can remove an item from the consent agenda and have it be placed on the regular portion of the agenda? Or would you prefer that practically a citizen would have to go through a council member who would have the authority then to remove the items from the consent agenda and place it on the normal portion? I don't, maybe I'm overly concerned on some of those things happening, but I think practically it could be an issue if to allow that to happen. So the question is, should the citizen language be kept in the agenda or put in the agenda for removal from the consent agenda, or should it not? And I think both ways are completely within your discretion to do either way. You could keep it one way for now and change it in the future if you'd like, but that's the direction we're seeking.
Thank you, Dan. Council discussion? Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor, and thanks, Dan. I personally don't think the word citizen needs to be in there. I think we're elected by the citizens, and I think with our move of our agenda having comments from the audience at the beginning, I would hope a resident could ask a council member even at that time, hey, could you pull an agenda item? I can't see anybody saying no to that. Most likely it's probably going to happen before the meeting anyway, so I'm fine with the language of removing the citizen part of that, and being that we're open to that, and put it where it needs to be in the agenda.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other discussion? Councilmember Fulch?
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, an example would be this evening, the gentleman who came first, and he asked about the mill and overlay project. I mean, had he known, he could have asked for it to have been pulled, and I was a little confused when Councilmember Lund brought up the issue about the about moving forward with assessments and, improvements and things like that. And so I wasn't, at first I thought you were pulling the mill and overlay from the consent agenda, so I got a little confused. Otherwise, I would have pulled it myself probably. But, so anywho, I would just advocate, the opposite, that it hasn't been a problem and it has been there for a long time. And I think that most folks don't really feel all of that, perhaps that comfortable in asking one of us. A lot of folks don't even know who their council member is, or don't understand the council process. Like, how do you figure that out? Who's my council member? I would say probably, at least I'm guessing, the majority of people don't know specifically who their council member is for their ward, and know who to specifically ask. And so I would ask just for it to be left, if it hasn't been a problem in the past, and if it was to actually empower citizens to speak up and ask for something to be pulled, then they could. So I would advocate for leaving it as it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Councilmember Lund?
Thank you, Your Honor. Point of clarification, was that an error that it was put in?
Councilmember Lund, I originally thought it was. I thought it had been inadvertently added to the agenda language at some point in the past. I actually looked back. I think I looked back to 1984, and the citizen language was in there. So that was probably my error. I should have contemplated that, but we just didn't think hadn't contemplated that it was in before then. But I can say at least in 1984 it's been in there.
Any other discussion, council? Councilmember Balsonic?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. So we could make a motion to approve the consent agenda information as written here, as it's written here.
Just for clarity, council member, I might propose that whoever makes the motion, make the motion to either include the citizen reference or not include the citizen reference. I think that'd be more clear for staff.
All right, then I'll make a motion that we not include the citizen, the citizen ability to remove items from the consent agenda.
Thank you, Councilmember Balsonic. Second, Councilmember Vaughn, second. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Thank you. I just wanted, for the comment section of this, I still want to say, I understand what Councilmember Fultz is saying, why not? But I think we recently have a change. I would ask our honor to say, when it's time for comments from the audience, invite them, because they may not know who we are, but they're going to come here and pull it anyway, so invite them at that time. The honor is going to be the one that's saying, welcome, please pull something from the agenda at this time if you want. So I think by making that change to the agenda is why I support this, is we have it now at the beginning of the meeting, and the mayor's going to greet somebody, and if somebody has an option, the mayor's going to be inviting for that, so.
Thank you. Councilmember Leifeld?
Coming into this, I thought, well, either way, it doesn't really matter to me. It hasn't happened in the 2 years I've been here, but when I hear you say that it's been in there since the 80s, and we have made that wonderful change to take comments from the audience at the beginning, which urges more people to come and talk to us so they don't have to sit through all the amazingly important things that thank you, intelligent comments that we all spew. But going to what Councilmember Fultz said, I'm going to agree with you on this in the fact that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if someone wants to have something pulled, guess what they have to do now? Now they have to wait to the end of the meeting, because that's where they're being moved to. Yes, if we pull it and they put it under, say, administration, it's now going to be pushed back after the reports from city staff. Am I correct in that?
Dan?
I can give that a shot. Council member, I think it would be generally a consent agenda item will be placed under whichever of the locations on the agenda it would normally fall. I agree, it probably would be maybe most commonly under administration, but it would not necessarily be. It could be public works or something else.
So as someone once told me in a meeting last week, if we're not receiving a lot of calls on this, why would we make a change to it? So I'm gonna go with leave the wording as it's been described over the last 30 years and leave it at that and let the community do what they want with it.
Councilmember Brax?
I think that I just have to go based on my prior experience, and I've never had a citizen call me in almost 5 years asking to remove something from the consent agenda. Usually people have an understanding of an issue or a subject or a topic, and so then I see that as my job to be an interpreter or translator of all this process language and say, well, this is what we normally do, and here's what we can do, and here are your options. And I feel perfectly comfortable communicating and educating anyone who wants to know that. And I would never say no to someone if they asked me to pull something from the consent agenda, because they obviously have something to say about it. So I understand the desire for dialogue, and I understand being open and wanting to have transparency and communication. But I think we also have to have control over the agenda of the council meeting, and that is vested in the mayor and the city council to be in charge of the agenda. So I would support the motion that is on the table.
Councilmember Lund?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, rearranging the agenda, I think, gives not just adequate but better than ever opportunity to speak to us, to speak to items on the consent agenda if they wish. I understand where Councilmember Fulch is coming from. If not for the placement of comments from the audience, I would completely agree with you. But I think if we, as a body, and the mayor approaches it, such as Councilmember Vaughn mentioned, I think what we're doing is probably doing better than just a hidden word somewhere that the citizen can do this, and you said it hasn't happened in so many years, probably because nobody knew about it. Now they know that they can, and I think if we make it more open and welcoming, then you know, that maybe we'll see more of it. Who knows? But I think making this change may bring to light that we can be more open at that comments from the audience stage point for that opportunity as well. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Councilmember Fulch?
Your Honor, perhaps we could place then under comments from the audience, maybe rather than just saying comments from the audience, say comments from the audience on consent agenda items and other, or, you know, something to that effect, so that they know that they could talk about something on the consent agenda. So it's in writing and it's clearer, you know, on the agenda, that would be the appropriate time for them to speak up and ask for something if that's on the consent agenda to be addressed. So I would support it then.
What's that? We have a motion.
I can chime in. Procedurally, I think if any of the council members would want to ask that the main motion be amended, they could bring that motion. That would need to be seconded and voted on. Then the main motion will be as amended, and you can proceed from there.
So then I would be asking for an amendment to Councilmember Vaughn's motion, Joe's motion, Balsonic's motion, just to include verbiage, comments from the audience on consent agenda items and other issues. Something to that effect.
Seconded by Liefeld. I'll have Julie take the, oh, okay.
Want to vote on the amendment?
Okay, so we'll call for a vote for the amendment. Do we, Lisa? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Vaughn, Balsonic. Okay. So I will have Julie take the roll.
So we'll be calling for a vote now on the motion as amended. So we will have, we will not include the citizen's ability to remove items from the agenda in that wording under the consent agenda, but under comments from the audience, it will now say comments from the audience on consent agenda or other items. Does that make sense? Okay, Councilmember Vaughn? No. Councilmember Fulch?
Yes.
Councilmember Balsonic?
No.
Councilmember Brox? Yes. Councilmember Lund?
Yes.
Councilmember Liefeld?
Yes.
Mayor Mayor Fassbender?
I think he would say yes.
Yes? Is that your vote, though?
It's my
Okay.
vote, sorry.
Okay, motion passes 5-2.
Motion passes 4-2. Okay, next we have solar subscriptions opportunities. Councilmember Fulch?
Get you going there.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to bring back forward the issue of solar subscriptions, since this was first discussed in 2017, to provide an update, because there have been some changes in solar gardens. So I just wanted to first start out with a reminder. How do I advance? Hold on. There we go. To remind folks, what is the Solar Rewards Community Program? It was mandated by Minnesota statutes in 2013 by the legislature. And so what it does is it provides the opportunity for solar gardens to be created within Xcel Energy territory only. And so in it, a bill credit amount changes annually according to Xcel Energy's applicable retail rate. And this kind of gets into the weeds. But so Xcel Energy determines what the rate would be to give for bill credits with solar gardens. And so subscribers must be not only in Xcel Energy's territory, but they can only subscribe to a garden that is within their own county or an adjacent county. So that means a county that actually touches upon your county. And that does not apply to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is not included within this. No subscriber can have more than 40% of any given single solar garden. Any entity can subscribe up to 120% of a 12-month average of your annual energy usage. The gardens that we're talking about in this case are 25-year gardens. Those are that's what takes place for commercial solar gardens. You may see on Xcel Energy, if you go to their website, you may see like a 5 or 10-year solar garden subscription, and that's meant for residents. It's not meant for large commercial scale gardens like this. And there's no upfront costs to subscribers, and also subscribers don't have any maintenance costs. It's completely put on the back of the provider. So that's a really quick high-level overview, and I know some of those things are a little confusing, but so I wanted to provide just a quick update on how this works. And so it's really it's this triangular-shaped partnership where here we have a diagram that shows, first of all, subscribers in the lower left-hand corner. I had written city underneath it to give an example if the city was a subscriber. And then the first arrow goes up towards subscription fee. The city would then pay a fee to the owner or the developer of the solar garden. So imagine like you had a gym membership, right? You have a subscription with the gym. It's kind of the same concept where you have a subscription where you pay the developer directly. And so the developer creates the energy within the solar garden, and they provide that electricity. It gets pumped into the energy grid through the massive network that Xcel Energy owns, and so then it gets pumped into the energy grid. Xcel Energy receives it, and they're happy to have solar garden energy because it helps distribute it across the state on the power grid, and so it helps them be more stable. And then Xcel Energy then provides back monthly bill credits to the subscriber. So again, you pay the solar garden gives the electricity to Xcel Energy, and then Xcel Energy, you still get a bill statement from them, but then you receive credits for the same amount of kilowatt hours that you have subscribed with a solar garden. So I'll just make something up. If you had 10 kilowatt hours for a subscription with the solar provider, that's how much you would receive back in credits from Xcel Energy. And so the saving is captured in my second bullet point there. For instance, currently the applicable retail rate, that's what that ARR is 12 cents, a little over 12 cents a kilowatt hour. And so that credit is greater than what you would pay for the solar garden payment. And if your payment was at 11 cents, then you could see that, hey, I'm paying 11 cents and I'm getting a little over 12 cents back from Xcel Energy. So that's where I got my penny saved. And then if you put it at a massive scale, like the city of Hastings, which would have over 5 million kilowatt hours of electrical consumption, that's where the pennies really, really add up quickly. So moving forward, historic rates since 2001 to 2017. This graph is showing across the years, starting in 2001 to 2015, going across. It's showing what happened every year with inflation. And so starting in 2001, you can see it was at about 3%, and then it took a big dip in that 1 year in 2002, and then it rebounded, and then it shows the trend across that time. And so over the last 15, there's been an average 3.3% increase in inflation for electricity. through Excel Energy specifically. And so what happened in 2016, that's when there began to become a lot of interest in solar gardens, where vendors were putting in for applications through Excel Energy to be able to create these solar gardens. The Met Council had an initiative where they were trying to bring together local governments to have a larger request for proposals to help the locals bring on board solar subscriptions. And so at that time, that's when I began to work with solar subscriptions in my day job. And so in the spring of 2017, I brought it forward to the council to take it into consideration. In June of 2017, the Hastings staff, they solicited proposals, and only two were received at that point. That was Renee Sola and Innovative Power Systems, which is IPS. And so during that time, staff were taking it in consideration. It was August 21st of 2017. The proposal came forward to a council meeting. That was the better of the two. They were providing a cost estimate, or I should say a savings estimate of $4.1 million of savings over 25 years. And it was sent at that council meeting to the utility committee of the council for consideration. In the month of September, there was a conference phone call of the utilities committee where 2 of the 3 members participated, and then a recommendation came forward to the council in October where they did not recommend approval of the solar subscription, and the council voted it down. And just to summarize the conversation, there was 2 primary reasons that were cited. First, that it was too risky in case the credit amount, the cost, the ARR, the rate actually dipped below the credit, so that you'd be inverted, that you'd be paying more than you would be receiving in a credit. And that the termination clause, that the penalties that were associated with that were considered too high at the time, and so it was defeated. So at the time, I had said to the council that, hey guys, this is, it's a limited deal, things are gonna change, this offer isn't gonna be lasting forever. Right now, that was the time for the best savings, and so I knew that there were changes that were being proposed, and so this is what shook down in the end in 2017. So Excel Energy, they did change the program, and so they decided that they wanted to change the credit rate from 12 cents at the time down to 10 cents, which drastically reduced the potential savings to subscribers. And then so any projects that had been submitted to Excel Energy for approval before, that should be January 1st of 2017, that's a mistake, it's a typo. They were grandfathered in for all of those rates. And then moving forward, the new solar gardens that were approved after January 1st, 2017, they would then have the new value of solar rates. And so Excel Energy, they determined for the next 25 years, hey guys, this is what the rates are gonna be. There's not gonna be any kind of real, cost savings or electrical savings for subscribers moving forward. It was going to be drastically reduced. And they also made it so that you couldn't have these ginormous 5 megawatt solar gardens any longer. You've seen, there's a few of them around. There's like one on the way out to Woodbury and Cottage Grove on County Road 95. There's a huge one in Red Wing, but you can't see it because it's kind of hidden behind the school district. I can show you pictures. It's something else to see. So that's too bad. So I asked Renee Solar for an update. Where are you at in December? And I asked who, which cities have actually come on board with them specifically for their gardens. And they provided, these are the 14 cities that are currently in business with Renee Solar. And so, Burnsville, Mendota Heights, Rosemont, Lakeville, Minneapolis, Vanderbilt, Renville, Stillwater, St. Cloud, Gibbon, New Auburn, Franklin, Chisago City, Jordan, and then last but not least, Hastings School District 2008. I've asked school board member Kelsey Waits to speak right after I do here to provide an update on what the school board has done with the school district. And then I had asked Innovative Power Systems, IPS, if they could provide a list of just any governmental agency that they're currently working with, and they provided this list of 20, and I don't think that this is all inclusive, but these are from the University of Minnesota, St. Cloud School District, Red Wing School District, Forest Lake, Annandale, City of Minnetonka. I mean, the list goes on and on. Lots of school districts. I think school districts are really motivated to save money make sure that money goes to our kiddos. And then I asked Pete Lindstrom, who is the local government liaison with Minnesota CERTS program, and he provided this additional list. I think there's 27 additional governmental entities between school districts and cities that are currently, that have solar subscriptions in place as well. And so there are quite a number of governmental entities that have gotten on board. I recently read an article that there's some complaining that all these great governmental agencies are able to take advantage of these solar subscriptions and not enough of them are going to businesses. And so I think the difference between businesses and governmental entities is that government knows it's going to be around in 25 years, and so that they're more able to lock into these longer term 25-year agreements. So what's changed? Why am I bringing this back forward? So as I said, the VOS is the value of solar agreements. And so one of the concerns that was expressed before, as I had said, that there was perhaps too much risk associated with not knowing what the rate structure was going to be in the future. So VOS is now rate locked in each year during the 25-year term. And so there's almost, I want to say, 3 tiers of pricing that are out there right now. There was the original pricing tier, which was like the most savings that were possible in that first set that was grandfathered in. And then there's this second tier of this VOS, this value of solar, which that still has savings associated with it, and they're pretty good. And then after that, there's this third tier of VOS rates, and oh boy, did they start to stink, where you're only saving maybe like a half a penny on a kilowatt hour. And so the savings is much, much less. And so like I said before, there's only so many of these subscriptions available. Again, the rules kind of make it even more market-driven, where you can only subscribe to a county that's right next to you. And so we're only able then to subscribe to a few counties that are adjacent to Dakota County. So what's happening is that some agencies that are a little risk averse, they are taking on a hybrid approach where they are taking advantage of the first tier that I was describing of the best rate AR subscriptions, and then coupling that with a value of solar rate tier as well. And so this is one proposal that I had received recently. I had asked vendors in December and January, if they could provide an update to the original terms. So all the same, if we were to have used exactly the same request for proposals, could you please provide an update? And so this was provided by IPS, and so here they're showing an example, and this wasn't confidential, so I can share this with you, where that first set is the floating ARR, which is the higher risk subscription, and then it's coupled with a guaranteed value of solar, and then so you are kind of balancing risk. And so just to give an example, and there is more flexibility with the VOS rates with cancellation policies. So I did ask Renee Sola and IPS, they do have within their VOS where they are allowing more flexibility for canceling policies, which eliminates some of that risk that the group was concerned about before. I did ask Renee Sola for an updated pricing structure in December, as I had said, and they provided 2 rate structures that would have provided us over $6 million of savings in each of those 25-year agreements. Just recently I recontacted them, and they said that other cities have taken, and other governmental school board districts and such, have taken advantage of what they had proposed. And so that is very limited, and so that they're actually waiting for the city of Egan, and I believe it was Rosemont again, to take on additional subscriptions. So we would have to wait to see what it is that they had for availability, but that best rate might be completely gone. So, and there is a third solar garden provider now down in Goodhue County called Greenmark, and so they did provide a proposal as well. And so I was asking for a motion for this to be so that it could be sent to the Planning Commission for consideration. They have a little bit more bandwidth, you know, they meet twice a month, and there's been, I think for the last 4 months, like December, January, February, March, where there was a cancellation because there wasn't enough on the agenda. So they have the bandwidth to be able to take on looking at this. Solar is not really an easy thing. You get down in the weeds, and the weeds get pretty deep pretty fast. And so it's a complicated issue, and it will take a little bit for staff and that group to come up to speed, but I have full confidence. We have a wonderful director here over the Planning Commission, and John Hinsman. But before I take questions, I wanted to invite Kelsey Waits, as I had mentioned before. She's a school district, she's a school board member, and Kelsey, would you like to come up and provide just a little bit of background information about how the school board began to have these discussions and how it is that it proceeded? So thanks, Kelsey.
Well, thank you for having me here. So as Tina mentioned, I'm Kelsey Waits. As she also mentioned, I am on the school board, and we did just enter an agreement with Renee Sola in January to be a part of 3 of their solar gardens. So we started looking at this really in depth last year, and Superintendent Collins had met along with 3 board members with different solar garden companies in order to get more information and get their bids. And as Tina mentioned, there are different ways to do pricing for this. One of the ways would be the variable rate, where sometimes you're saving a lot, and then there's the risk that you're not saving very much, and you never really know how that's going to play out. And so as a government entity in charge of taxpayer dollars, we decided that that was too risky of an investment for us. So we actually settled on a contract that would keep a flat rate of savings. And while in the long run, this may not be the most savings that we could have possibly gotten, we felt it was the most responsible with taxpayer dollars, and it does still give a large amount of savings and support green energy. So we ended up entering an agreement with Renee Sola. They gave us the best contract, and they guaranteed a 1.5 cent savings per kilowatt hour over the course of 25 years. So we know that kilowatt hours will decrease over time just as energy efficiency increases, but even with that change, we expect on average to save $100,000 per year for a total of $2.5 million over the course of the 25-year contract. And along with these expected savings, Renee Sola also offered the district an $80,000 sign-on bonus, $40,000 of which was given up front, which was also a benefit. The school district did not have to invest anything. If you think that's too good to be true, I agree. All the school board members agreed, which is why we had a lawyer look over all of the documents, and they had suggested some very minor changes to the language, which again, Renee Sola fully agreed to. I should also add that if at any time the solar garden is damaged, the district does not have to pay for any maintenance of that. We just don't get our 1.5 savings during the time that the garden is being fixed. One of the main concerns that we discussed as a board was whether signing into a 25-year agreement was the best choice, given the fact that we know technology is constantly changing and that it will improve, and maybe in a few years there would be a better option. However, we also realized that technology is rapidly changing and will always run the risk of that being a reason not to sign on to technology. Because in 5 years, we can make the same argument that in a couple years, something better will come along. So while it's possible that in 5 to 10 years there will be a better option, at that point the district will have already saved $500,000 to $1 million plus the sign-on bonus. So any savings that this new technology could bring will also have to overcome the savings that we've already accumulated during the time. So given all of this information, in January the school board unanimously decided to join into this contract, and we've been very happy since then. So.
Thank you, Kelsey.
So Your Honor, I can stand for questions, or if you, from the council if they'd like to, or if you'd like to open it up to the audience for questions as well, or comments.
Council, any discussion? Councilmember Layfield?
Thank you, Tina, and Councilmember Fulch and Kelsey. I loved Kelsey's comment towards the end that technology is always advancing, and we can't not do something today because it might be better 5 years down the road. I owned a Beta machine in the 80s when Beta was supposed to be the big thing because it was smaller than everything else. And then came VHS, and then came DVDs, and then came Blu-ray. You don't even know what I'm talking about. Old people respond with a yes if you know what a Beta tape is. Thank you, exactly. So I agree with that statement. We definitely have to do something, and it should, to talk about what we should have done 2 years, all ifs and whats. So I think now is the time where we want to go ahead and look at this. I do have more questions. As everyone knows, when we're elected, that's not my daytime job. I don't know anything about solar. And I don't really, I guess I didn't know I wanted to. But now I'm finding out more about it and doing some research, and found that wind turbines, that Excel, I think, buys more of they have more wind farms than they do solar gardens.
At this point, yes.
At this point, and that in 2017, across 8 states of service, 40% of their electricity came from carbon-free sources. So this is a carbon-free source, and as a city, we can take part in that. So I'm glad you had the strength and to continue on with this and to keep doing your homework and to educate me on it. I appreciate that. This is definitely something that I want to be on the right side of this. So thanks for bringing it forward. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know where to start. Personally, I don't think this is the right way. We as a group discussed this sustainability, I used that word at our retreat, and it was not brought up as a priority, and if we as a body want to get some things done, this didn't raise up from all of us voting as that. I have a lot of questions. I'm not opposed to the policy discussion on solar or sustainability. I definitely don't think it should go to Planning Commission because that's not the role of Planning Commission. I came off of that. That just because they have bandwidth doesn't mean that's where it should go. I think it should stick with us. We need to still talk about this. Personally, Councilmember Fulch, I don't know why I hope we weren't soliciting talking to vendors on behalf of the city of Hastings if we're not agreeing to someone talking to say, hey, give me some quotes for potential solar in Hastings, because we voted 4 years ago on this, and it actually looks like it was a pretty good vote because things changed already. They already made some changes into the program. And if you listen to the NPR thing, the Excel Energy had to go back to the state of Minnesota to say, hey, things aren't working. Small businesses, residents aren't signing up for this. It's government that's signing up for it. I'm not opposed to that. I still think that's good. I did talk to 3 of my school board members, and I pushed them a little bit to say, you may have got $80,000 up front. You may get some savings with some flat rates. But me as a homeowner, as a taxpayer, I pay Excel Energy bill. There's no free money. My bill will most likely rise because Excel needs to pay for their investment that they're doing. The only policy thing that I want to get into is the process, how it goes there. When I hear there's no upfront cost, but I see the triangle that says there's a fee, that's a cost to us, but it's going to come back around, I want to work directly with Excel Energy. Why isn't Excel Energy building these solar gardens and working with us as government? They chose to use this third-party person. Somehow they need to get paid. I'd seen the list. I agree some cities are doing this, some school districts are doing this, but You know what Hastings has is we've been doing renewable energy for 25 plus years with our hydro plant. We're ahead of the curve, if you ask me, than what those other groups are doing. And we as a body need to discuss this and agree on a policy before we are reaching out to say, this process, how it even came here, it should have came through a different way. If we're going to talk about it, it goes back to Utility Commission, Committee of Council, in my opinion, and we discuss it there. But I want you as colleagues to remember, we did not raise this up as a priority in our 2-day workshop. Why did we meet if we're going to keep bringing the stuff up that didn't hit a priority of all of us that we agreed on? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. Councilmember Brox?
I am in agreement that clean energy is something that we do want to be a part of, and I want to sign up for something that is beneficial not only for the environment but for the city of Hastings. And there were a lot of problems with the contract that I saw when we examined it as part of the Utilities Committee. I just made a list of some of my concerns. Councilmember Fulch did say some of them. The primary one being that the term is 25 years. And while that is, you can make an argument that's the way things are, that is possibly 5 councils beyond my council term. And so now I am making a decision that is going to last into the future well beyond me, and that doesn't get lost on me. I personally have a solar garden subscription at my house, and I went through 3 or 4 rounds of negotiation with NRG to get the proposal that I have. And so I didn't take the first proposal that came along, and it wasn't the best proposal that came along. So I'm not opposed to looking at a solar garden subscription, but I think the other thing to remember is subscription revenue benefits the company. I work for a company that sells subscriptions because it's better for a company to get a little bit of money over the course of a lot of years than it is to get a big balloon payment up front. Companies want you to sign up monthly so that you're constantly writing them a check. They have guaranteed revenue. It benefits them. So I don't have a problem with that, but I want to make sure that it also benefits us. The other thing was the termination clause fee was a minimum of $250,000, and that was after 10 years. And I don't feel comfortable paying $250,000 of our taxpayers' money on a bad deal. So if we're going to sign up for one, and I know there's a lot of benefits to it, my opposition to the previous contract was not the policy or the purpose behind it of creating solar energy and taking advantage of that. It was the contract that was in front of me shifted all the risk onto us as the city of Hastings, which our finance manager was in agreement with. She agreed that it was extremely risky for the city of Hastings because you have the triangle and you have the possibility of any number of factors changing. Solar is an unregulated industry. The federal government could choose to bring solar under regulation at any point in time, now in the next 20 years. So that could change. Another thing that changed obviously was the price. We are concerned about the price changing because the subscription company isn't in charge of the price. Excel is in charge of the price. So as we saw, the prices changed and dropped. So as more solar energy goes to the grid, it's only logical that that demand and that supply is increasing, the price is going to drop. That's a basic principle of economics. So it's not that I oppose solar energy or don't want it. I want to see a better contract, and I think we owe it to our constituents to demand good terms that are in our favor, that share that liability and that risk amongst us and the person who's making money off of our subscription. And there's just a number of things that could change. So I'm not averse to being a part of technology, but we need to take an informed approach about what the possibilities are, what the probabilities are, and what could change, and incorporate those possibilities into what we agree to. And as I said, you know, I evaluated a contract for my own home, which there were a number of opportunities to do. You can go on Google Home and you can use that app that they have to see if you personally can put solar panels on your roof. So when we did that, we found out we were thinking about just putting solar panels on our roof and investing in our own capital items instead of giving our money to a solar garden. But what we found out is we live in a neighborhood that has big trees. our house is really shaded, and we're not gonna get any benefit out of putting those solar panels on our roof because we're not gonna generate enough solar to give back to the grid. So in doing that, it made more sense for us to sign up for a subscriber deal. I'm just asking for the same level of analysis on the contract that we would with anything we signed up for our own home, because I think we owe that to the residents of Hastings.
Thank you, Councilmember Brox. Councilmember Liefeld?
That was very well said. And looking at this, I'm not seeing this as this is who we have to go with. I'm hearing we need to bring this back to committee and we need to figure out who is it. This is information that you've been able to compile yourself. The city didn't pay for any of this. This is something you did on your own time, like you did with the internet when you did this at home. So what I'm hearing from you and what I'm seeing in front of me in regards to all of the data, you know, electricity in Minnesota is regulated, so costs can change, you know, so there's a lot of things that can happen here. I agree with that. But I think what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Fulch, is this is your way to say to the council, we need to bring this back. We need to talk about this, and we need to get something going now. It doesn't need to be this, but we need to do something. Am I correct in that? Or are you bringing forward?
Correct. Yes, I have several responses to the concerns that were just raised. And so thank you, Councilmember Liefeld. Yes, I'm bringing this forward again because things have changed in regards to solar subscriptions and how the pricing does work. And so it eliminates the risks that were being brought forward before. When this issue first came up in 2017, it never received a full meeting that met the Data Practices Act, or an open meeting law, actually, where there was a meeting that took place in person. It was just a phone conversation. And it was initially even meant to have been a go-to meeting where you could see the presentation by the vendor, and there's all sorts of technology failures. And so it was just a phone call, and when I spoke to the representative afterwards, he had said that he wasn't even aware that the council hadn't been given a primer workshop so that they could understand more holistically all the issues that are surrounding solar. And so he thought that and so again, it was only Councilmember Brox and Lund who were on the conference call, were further along the educational spectrum. And so something I tried to interject because I was on that committee, or that conference call, but since I wasn't a member of the committee, I wasn't really allowed to speak at length, was the fact that contract terms are completely negotiable. In my day job, I'm a contracts administrator. I work for the city of Red Wing. I did negotiate what I was told was the best pricing that was given to any of the solar subscribers through IPS. And what that meant was literally me negotiating a better rate and going over the contract terms at a minimum of a dozen times with the city administrator and the finance director until we had gone through every paragraph. It was 30-page contract, and I memorized. I mean, like, I could flip to a paragraph. I had read it so many times. And so, yeah, sometimes that's what it takes to make sure that you get the terms that you want. And so I was really disappointed that I couldn't interject and provide that kind of guidance to the group so that it was more readily understandable, really what contract terms meant, and how the initial out clause that was provided could, again, probably have been negotiable. I don't know. I wasn't a part of those conversations, and so I was really disappointed that it sunk. Because you know what I've noticed the last 2.5 years is that we don't have any proposals that come to us for cost savings. You know, that proposal was a $4 million savings over 25 years. And this last one that I had asked Renee Sola for an update, that was over $6 million. I'm sorry. I mean, we're looking at having to disinfect now, chlorinate our water system, and the millions of dollars that's going to cost in the next 10 to 20 years, not to mention infrastructure costs for road improvements and other facility upgrades that are needed. And so perhaps sustainability didn't come, it wasn't in our top 3 issues, which were housing, roads, and The third was, what, dear? Transportation. And so, yeah, those are big, heavy lifts that we need long-term strategic visioning for to move our community forward. This is an operational expense. This is not a huge lift. This can be delegated to the Planning Commission. They can look at what the various options are and provide insight as to what would be a good recommendation for our city. I don't believe that the council members themselves have the bandwidth just to sit in, we can't even come to decisions in the 50-minute workshops that we typically have to begin with. I think that this takes a deeper dive, insight, and it really has a pretty substantial learning curve to it. It isn't like you can just read a quick proposal and go, yeah, got it. As a school board member Waits had said, they had long, lengthy conversations with their attorney over several iterations, and so it isn't just a one-time deal that you read a proposal and you go with it. And so, again, I have provided to you the names of 61 cities and school districts that I was able to identify by just asking 3 people who are knowledgeable in the field. And so this, I'm sorry. When we look at who is getting these solar subscriptions, these aren't Hodunkvilles. This is the city of Burnsville, Rosemont, Minneapolis, St. Cloud, Stillwater. And these cities are going all out, 100% renewable. University of Minnesota, St. Cloud School District, City of Minnetonka, Maple Grove. These are first-tier, first-rate cities with staffs of attorneys on hand that are looking at these issues. These aren't willy-nilly decisions that are being made and, oh, heck, golly geez, I don't know. These are the best of our state that are taking on these solar subscriptions. And so I just think it would be a great disappointment that if we didn't even take into consideration and have the due diligence of having meetings that adhere to the open meeting laws and have staff who are of the caliber, such as John Hinsman, who are very knowledgeable and can take on these kinds of complex issues and understand them and put forward recommendations to the city council. And then it's up for the city council just to look at what those final recommendations are after staff and our city attorney have had the opportunity to review it rather than just individual council members. So, as I had asked, I'm just looking for a motion to refer the solar subscription opportunities to the Hastings Planning Commission under John Hinsman, just to look further into solar subscriptions and bring forward a recommendation for the council to take into consideration.
Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Councilmember Brock said it very well. The last opportunity wasn't a very solid opportunity. It wasn't the right fit for us at the time. The particular vendor was not well suited to answer some of the questions. Some of the answers to the questions were not what we were looking to hear for on a risk level. The council chose not to move forward as a whole. But we did choose to look at it to begin with. Things have changed. Perhaps maybe the amount of diligence that went into it to begin with wasn't as high as it should be, so that we have some of these options in front of us. I think the conversation would be much different if we would have known about some alternative pricing structures or different lengths of term, but that was not at all on the table at that point in time. So I guess, no, it's not on the top of our list as far as strategic plan. And no, it's not necessarily a huge strategic lift. We're not saying we're going 100% carbon free and we're doing, whatever. That'd be a strategic plan item. This is probably not that. But we did at one point in the recent future, or recent past, sorry, 6 out of the 7 of us were here, thought it was worth looking at, and so we did. So I would say that since we did agree on that, things are maybe more favorable. It's worth poking under the hood a little bit, I think. So, you know, I don't know what'll come of it, but vetting it a little bit better, understanding where it fell flat last time. You've addressed some of them, thank you. Maybe it would provide good guidance to the commission or the committee, however this ends up shaking out, so that we can make a better decision for the community, because it's too easy to say it's renewable energy, so it's a no-brainer. It's too easy, I'm sorry to say, because Minneapolis does it, and they're a big city, that we should do it too because they've got lawyers. You know, I mean, we're our own city, we're intelligent people as well, and we need to make a choice for our city. And so, I understand where you're going with it. They're not haphazardly going about it, probably. I get the point, but we're not either. So I would like to see this looked at further. If there is more valuable information to pull from it, better opportunities than prior, let's do it. Let's look at it. Understand where it fell flat before. Ms. Waits mentioned, you know, if you wait 5 years, something better might come along, and I completely agree. You know, we can't just wait for something better to come along. I don't think that's what we're doing. I think we just didn't feel comfortable with what was laid out in front of us in the last opportunity. Straight up.
Yes,
It has nothing to do with adversity to renewable resources. It has nothing to do with any of that. Certainly isn't about not liking to save money, right? It's not that at all. I think it's just a bigger commitment than maybe it sounds like on the front end, and we need to understand that better. So let's understand that better.
Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Councilmember Bolsonic?
Procedural question, Your Honor. Did Councilmember Fulch make a motion? Did you make a motion?
I can make the formal motion. Yes, that was my request that I'd like to make. So my motion is to refer review of a 2019 solar subscription opportunities in general to the Hastings Planning Commission under the guidance of John Hinsman for recommendations for it to be brought forward to the council for consideration.
Okay.
So is that a motion?
That isn't.
That's
That is
a motion for it to go to the Planning Commission for review.
Councilmember Liefeld. Oh, Councilmember Lund.
Can I, Your Honor, may I ask why the Planning Commission specifically? What's the value of that versus the Utility Committee or?
Well, okay, so there is not a utilities commission where there's a volunteer group to look at these types of issues. And so I believe that it falls under planning because the planning group does, you know, oftentimes traditionally looking at zoning variations, new business development and housing and things of that nature. And so because we don't have a sustainability commission, I mean, there are many groups that do have, or cities that do have environmental commissions, sustainability related commissions, and we don't have one. I mean, what do we have? We have, you know, Parks and Rec, we have planning, we have HEDRA, and so I feel after looking at it that this would best fall underneath the Planning Commission. Like I said, the council doesn't have the bandwidth to take the deep dive that this actually does need to be able to understand it more thoroughly. I think that also, if it had a more knowledgeable staff person, originally this was given to Sarah Hodder, who was a clerk at the time, to just kind of shepherd, and she had no exposure previously to solar subscriptions. It is a very complicated issue, and so I think that it would behoove us for it to be assigned to a higher level staff member also that has the ability to understand complex issues and walk citizen groups through them.
Councilmember Bolsonic.
Thank you, Your Honor. This would be a question for either Mr. Flegel or Mr. Hinsman. By ordinance, is the Planning Commission scope something that would include researching something like this?
I'll make a few comments, and certainly John can comment. Planning Commission is different than other commissions we have. It's set up by statute. All cities have to have a Planning Commission, so it's a little different animal. The Planning Commission ordinance, I think if you read it, there is a reference to utility infrastructure planning or something similar to that. I think that's the closest that I could say that it does fall within their purview. I mean, I'll be honest, this generally would be something that staff would think would be referred to the Utilities Committee of the council, but when I looked at it, I also don't find a legal reason why the council could not refer it to the Planning Commission for consideration. So I guess that's what I would be left with.
Well, thank you. You keep referring to the limited bandwidth of the council committee system, and I think we have very good bandwidth. When we meet, we don't just meet for 45 to 50 minutes. Sometimes we go a couple of hours, and we're not limited by meeting every 2 weeks. We can meet whenever it's convenient for the committee members. I don't think it's a good idea to put it to the Planning Commission to look over. I think the Committee of Council, the Utilities Committee would be fine. We've got full access to staff to fill us in on information and background and so forth. So I would oppose the motion as stated because of the referral to the Planning Commission. Now, just a couple of other things here, watching the hour and trying to get us moving along. There was a comment made, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if there was damage to equipment, that we would not be responsible for it, but we would lose our yearly profit.
No, I can address
So-
that. And so
so
the
in
issue is, like,
essence-
let's say
Well,
the tornado comes through.
Excuse me, I still have the
You
floor.
asked the question, I'm sorry.
I know.
was trying to address
I
your
know,
question
but
before you go on a
yeah,
rhetorical.
to just finish, it's just my rationale is that there's damage, we're not gonna get paid for that year. Well, we're in essence paying for it.
It's not the year.
Well, whatever it is.
Let's say
but-
that there's a storm
excuse
and a
me,
solar
excuse-
subscription.
Excuse me, if I can continue.
Okay, again, if you're gonna go on about an
there-
example.
Tina, excuse me. Let him finish, please.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Sure.
Technology, it's not a case of technology might change. Technology is going to change. We know that. We know that for sure. And I haven't heard anything about the company swapping out equipment for newer equipment that's going to be more energy, more effective, more efficient than what we would agree to today. So I'd kind of like to have somebody take a look out there and say, well, you know, is there something that's out on the horizon that we might be interested in? And then secondly, we've got to put this out on bids. All I've heard is what one company is telling us we're going to get. I don't feel safe with that kind of information. I would like to see what other companies could do. Perhaps with the bid system, we might be guaranteed a couple of cents more per kilowatt hour, maybe even more so on that. But all that said, and like everyone else has said, I am not opposed to alternative energy solutions. We have a geothermal heating system, heating and cooling system in our home, and it works very well. In 10 years, there's probably going to be something better than that, but we did make that commitment. It just, you know, what we're looking at here is a snapshot. even with all the information, it's just a snapshot. And I would like to, look at this much, much more in depth. And then the last comment to make is that our financial director said this is too risky. And that's good enough for me. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Councilmember Sonic. Councilmember Fulch.
Yes, a few things there. So to clarify on if there's an outage, let's say that there was a thunderstorm or severe line winds that come through and knock out some solar panels and that they're not available for a month. And so the city wouldn't have to pay for the subscription for the month. It wouldn't be like you're out for the whole year. And so the city doesn't lose out on anything, and it would be a short duration of time, just that it's out. Your second issue about bids, and so I didn't provide you information about one. I told you that there were 3 solar vendors that I was aware of that had the availability right now. And so the way that you do it, this isn't something that you put out for requests for bids. You put it out for requests for proposals. You receive proposals. You can negotiate terms on absolutely everything that is under the proposal. And then in regards to looking at technology replacement, so what happens for instance, if solar panels are found to be, there's a manufacturing problem with them or something to that effect, it is the vendor who takes care of replacement. They're in the business of making money, and so they want to make sure that those solar gardens are pumping out as much juice as possible, and so they stay on top of that because it affects their bottom line. And so your questions were well put, Councilmember Balsonic, and it goes to my point about how it is a complex issue, and it does take a more sophisticated staff member to take it on and to really understand the ins and outs of it, and to look at what are the options and to bring forward proposals, and then they could be offering guidance to the council. It puts me in an awkward position that I am pretty much an expert in this area, and so I have good insights about what it takes to move this forward, and so that's why I was asking for it to go to the Planning Commission. As our attorney, Dan Flugel, had just mentioned, it is within the purview of it to go to the Planning Commission, and I just really like to see it have more due diligence and thought put into it so that good recommendations are coming forward and that the council are able to ask a staff member, and then the staff member is able to provide, and then in accordance also with Dan Flugel, better recommendations to the council moving forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor. It just goes back to the process. Look at what we're doing right now. I look at staff time, sitting on the finance committee. This will take time. John Hinsman, I know, he's a great city community development director, but our public works director is the one that takes care of renewable energies, takes care of our hydro plant. That's why it should go to the utility committee of the council. That's the expert in our city that already knows it, so John Hinsman doesn't have to get up to speed. Nick Eggert's already in it. Again, we shouldn't be using names here. It should be the process. This process is flawed. That's why I think the whole thing is flawed, the way we're going about this, because we as a council should be directing where this goes, not just one memo that says this is a motion. I can't support what's going forward.
Councilmember Vaughn. Councilmember Lightfoot.
Couple quick questions, Julie or Mayor. In our 30-year comp plan, do we have any wording in there about our carbon footprint? Do you know offhand if we? I don't know for sure. If we have any wording about carbon footprint. In green steps, we have, I think that's green steps, those great little blocks that we have out in the lobby for doing these things. So looking at that and looking at some numbers while I've been sitting here listening to all of this, Xcel Energy's goal is to be carbon-free by 2050.
Yes.
They are currently 40% carbon-free. In the year,
yeah,
in 2017, they were 40% carbon-free. Looking at this we're definitely going in this direction. Looking at wind, whether it be solar. I believe the generic form in which you presented this, that this does need to go to committee This does need the staffing time. We do need it to, as a council, sit down and talk about how we're going to get bids, how that process is going to happen. But I would like to amend the previous motion, thank you, that this be sent to the Utilities Committee. At that point, we do have the right to remove it and move it to someplace else, but it needs to have a home to start, because we have to start somewhere. And I do like the notes regarding, you know, where our proficiencies lie in regards to our staff. So I would recommend that we amend the prior motion to send this to the Utilities Committee of, I believe it is now what, Sonic, Bolch, and Lund, if that's correct?
Councilmember Lund? Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would second the amendment to the motion. I'm on that committee. Mr. Balsonic's on that committee, and Councilmember Folch is on that committee. So we've got 3 people that I believe will do a good job sifting through the information. Whatever staff is needed to get us that information that we need, I have full faith that we'll have that. I don't know what this will look like when it comes out of that committee, but it's probably not exactly what you got on your PowerPoint presentation. But that might be a good thing, right? We'll talk about it. We'll learn more about this. We'll have a better understanding of what the opportunities really are out there, what the best fit is for the city rather, and then if it is deemed appropriate, move it on through the process. And then all of us can talk about it again. Vetted, perhaps a little better opportunity than before, because again, it wasn't a great opportunity before. The idea is good, in my opinion, but the opportunity was not at that time. So I second the motion. It's probably the longest second to a motion of an amendment, but that's fine. I have the microphone, so I can do that.
Thanks you, Councilmember Lund. So we need to vote on the amendment?
Which is to send it. So now you'll be voting on to send this topic to the Utilities Committee of the Council. That's the amendment.
Well, I would be willing to withdraw my original motion. And so I'm willing to withdraw my original motion for it to be recommended to the Hastings Planning Commission. I can do that, right? No?
I think for clarity, I mean, I would suggest that the council agree to allow the motion to be withdrawn, a new motion made to send it to Utility Committee of the council, which sounds like that's probably going to gain unanimous traction here. And you've got a moving party that's asking to withdraw. I mean, you can ask for it. If not, then just vote on the amendment. I think that's also possible. I'd say if there's not unanimous agreement to withdraw the motion, then you should call the vote on the amendment. That would change the main motion to be send it to the Utilities Committee of the council, and then you would call for the vote on that, which is effectively the same end result as what your withdrawal of the motion would be.
Okay,
Vote on the amendment.
so we're voting on the amendment.
That's what I would say is.
Vote on the amendment, okay.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails.
Now you have to vote on the
Main motion as amended.
And the main motion as amended, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch, for your presentation. Councilmember Lund, we are.
Thank you, Your Honor. So just as a reminder of what I had explained it in full detail at the beginning, so I don't know if I need to go into it completely here, but basically 3 items that I'd like to move along to the Operations Committee, all involving neighborhood improvement or street improvement projects. Item number 1 is to establish or just, these are all discussions, hopefully they come up, something comes of it, but to look at our CIP as kind of our guideline for how we can provide advance notice to residents X years out, let's say it's 5 for an example, of approximately when a project will take place in front of their residents, giving them ample time to plan, ask questions, and understand expectations. And again, noting that they're probably not going to walk away with a dollar figure that's right on the number. That's not the point of this. It's to understand that something's coming down the line and they can educate themselves. Second, I call it a brochure, but whatever you want to call it, mapping out the journey of from beginning to end of what it's like to have your street improved, what to expect, definitions of things like what is an assessment, how is it calculated, where do I go for information, what the process is, what all the milestones are, and so forth. And then third, provide some clarity and documentation of the formulas that are used for calculating assessments. So there's more clarity in writing that we can reference and that staff can point to instead of having to explain rationale. They can have that documented calculation. And like I said prior, if there's a debate on the number, it's a debate on the calculation, and that can be something that then is discussed in committee and whatnot at later times. But hopefully will help provide some guidance and understanding for some of these more complicated calculations that we may be seeing coming up as we come into some more interesting neighborhood improvement opportunities, like some of the newer developments that'll eventually need to be improved. So I lied when I said it was going to be shorter than last time. But
clarification: is that a motion then, yes. Council member?
Correct.
Okay, then I'll second it.
Yeah.
And just say, I know the two of us have had discussions about this, and I think it's a really good proactive thing to do. And there is a precedent because our Historic Preservation Commission has booklets and guidelines for people who purchase and move into designated historic buildings here in Hastings. So I strongly support the motion to take everything to the Operations Committee of the Council.
Seconded by Balsag. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you, Trevor. Council, do you have any announcements? Councilmember Brooks?
This is more, I'll just consider this a public service announcement. But I had an email today from a mom, and it was very distressing to me, but her son walks home from school, and he's been getting harassed as he walks home. He's fairly young, and I'll keep the details private for their sake. But I just want to say that I believe that Hastings is better than that, and if you see somebody being picked on, harassed, bugged, I think it's all of our responsibility to take initiative to protect our students and people around us who are being harassed for a variety of reasons, whether they are age or ethnicity or anything. And so I would just encourage all of us to look out for each other and to continue to stand up to people who want to bully, and especially our students. We'll take steps. I have some more details, and we'll take steps privately to make sure that the student is safe. But I just wanted to encourage our members of our community that, as we have said, we're a welcoming community. In order to make that a reality, we all have a responsibility to stand up for people that can't stand up for themselves. So I would just like to encourage all of us to take that responsibility on, not just us as city council members, but the entire community. That's all.
Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Layfield?
Just to comment on Lori's, thank you for bringing that up. And I want to mention one piece that it's not just children who are mean, it's adults as well. So if you hear something or see something, say something. Don't be afraid to call an adult out when you hear them belittling or bullying a child. So thank you, Lori, for bringing that up.
Before I get into my announcement, oh, sorry, Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to give a quick update from this morning. 3 of us attended the Dakota County Legislative Breakfast. It was myself, Julie Flatten, and Mayor Fassbender. And I wanted to touch upon real quickly on 3 separate things. The first was I connected a couple of times in the last month with Wendy Wolf. She's a representative from the Met Council. And I was asking for time with her because I wanted to talk about future transit planning. The council as a whole has talked a couple of times in the last year about wanting to look at transit opportunities. We've talked about, wouldn't it be nice if we could get some kind of bus service down to Hastings, and we had discussed at length late in the last year the idea about approaching the Met Council and asking for a memorandum of understanding if we were to join the taxing district. Would they be open to negotiating a pilot with us, or just begin those conversations, because 2040 is the soonest. They've been saying that they would provide us busing with no if we don't take any kind of a proactive approach between here and then. And so she agreed to helping make connection with Met Council staff and our council administrator, Julie Flatten. She made those arrangements today with Ms. Wolf so that we can meet with the Met Council staff and have a discussion about what kind of possibilities could there be in the future for bringing bus service to Hastings more readily than 2040. Secondly, Councilmember Balsanik's been doing a nice job about bringing up the need for local government aid, and there's legislation that's coming forward. And so we did bring that up to our representatives, that we would appreciate if they would support LGA funding. And what was interesting is that the county is also looking forward to receiving LGA funding, but they're also putting in a $22 million request for bonding. And I was surprised to see in there $4.1 million that they're setting aside for a Mississippi River Trail, of which a portion of that is the connection that the city and Red Wing have been talking about. And so they had that on their plan. I was really surprised to see that they're wanting to help move that initiative forward. And so that's something for us to put on our radar screen as we're moving forward. If we're gonna also have to, I'm sure we'll have to ante up something to be a part of that. And then lastly, we had a discussion. It was Senator Carla Bigham and Representative Tony Juergens was sitting with us, and the mayor of South St. Paul. And so we were talking about local needs, and so we did talk about our capital, the request for capital bonding dollars for the City Hall here. And then also for 316, that Representative Juergens had put in a bonding bill. And so Nick Egger, our Public Works Director, just recently went up and testified before the House in regards to that. And the bonding amount was reduced from $2 million to $1 million to only cover the trail portion of 316. Representative Juergens said that after review, that was the only amount that was eligible for general fund bonding dollars. And what was a little startling was to find out that there hasn't been a companion bill that has been introduced in the Senate. Senator Bigham had said that she has requested several times the companion bill information so she could introduce it in the Senate, but Representative Juergens to date has not conceded. He's not allowing her to introduce that companion bill in the Senate, which was really concerning, because then it won't be up for consideration in the end. That's what Senator Bigham was saying, that it won't go to conference committee and it won't be considered. And so that was really startling, and I think that perhaps we as a council should urge Representative Juergens to put aside partisan issues and work in a bipartisan manner and have that companion bill dropped in the Senate so that we can have a bonding bill that is alive and up for consideration in case a bonding bill does pass this legislative session. So Mayor Fassbender was there as well and heard the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. With that, we have lots of things going on within the city. One priority right now is, of course, our flooding. And so, Nick, I see you're still here. Would you mind just giving us a short little update? And thank you for all your work and your efforts from your staff. It's been amazing to hear our communicator, Lee Stuffel, update us on a daily routine, and I know you're a big part of that. So I thank you. I hear many comments from the community.
Thank you, Mayor Fassbender. And it's not just me, it's not just Lee. Not trying to rhyme there. It's not just Public Works staff, it's total team effort. Most of you were there with the sandbagging initiative a week or so ago, and you could feel the community interest swell with that. And even though it certainly appears at this point that those sandbags aren't going to be needed to protect homes, to be prepared was the objective, and we achieved that very easily. And we've stayed vigilant about it. We've been watching things on a daily basis, and as you alluded to, Mayor, putting those bits of updated information on the website and using social media, et cetera, to document this and to keep the public informed. So I think it's played out very well, better than we expected as far as forecast versus reality. We've had the right type of spring melt off. All the conditions have kind of aligned here, and but we'll be documenting this one too and taking that forward. Looks like the river's cresting as I speak here. Been watching that throughout the day in the graph, and it starts to drop off after a few more hours, it appears. So that's not to say that it won't stay high. It definitely looks like we're going to have elevated river levels for a while, but we continue in this pattern, and I think I won't put money on it yet, but I'm hoping the worst of this is over with, and then in a couple weeks we can start to look at what kind of cleanup and repair jobs we're going to have to do to get things along the riverfront back to their fine shape so that we can enjoy them this summer. So
thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you're welcome.
Nick. Along with another water issue, I just want to invite everybody to the open house on our water disinfection, which will be held this Thursday, April 4th, beginning at 6 o'clock in the community room, and there will be a presentation at 6:30. Parks and Rec Commission will be meeting on Tuesday, April 9th at 7 p.m. The Heritage Preservation Commission will be holding a meeting on Tuesday, April 16th at 7 p.m. at City Hall. Arbor Day is Friday, April 19th, and our annual celebration this year will be at Riverwood Park, and there'll be some planting of trees, and that is 1 to 2:30. Hastings Annual Spring Cleanup Day will be Saturday, April 27th, from 9 to 1 o'clock, and that you will meet at the Public Works facility. Our next council meeting is April 15th, Monday, April 15th, and a shout out to Joe and Betsy celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary on Friday. That's great. Congrats. That is all my announcements. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Bolsonic.
Your Honor, I was just going to say the secret to our longevity is staying out of each other's way.
Oh my God, I love it.
Okay. I'll try to remember that. If there are no other announcements, could I get an emotion to accept, Councilmember Brax, to adjourn? Yes. Second. And Councilmember Bolsonic, adjourn. We are adjourned.